Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am the Omni viewer, and this is a bit of general movie industry news which I don't always cover on the channel, but it is connected to certain topics that are the channel's focus, particularly the MonsterVerse, so I figured I'd talk about it here. Now, if you've been paying attention, you might know that Warner Brothers has been the center of a bidding war recently. Yes, they'd originally been bought out by AT&T, but that didn't work out, so AT&T parted ways, took a couple of things with them. Max became HBO Max again, and now there's a bidding war going on for the studio. And there have been two major contenders vying for the studio and all of its content: Paramount and Netflix. And for a while, it looked like Netflix was going to win, because every time Paramount upped the deal, Netflix upped the deal, and it seemed like the higher-ups at Warner Brothers were favoring what Netflix was offering. But apparently, Paramount just made one more offer that Netflix is not trying to surpass. They're not making any more bids, so now the prediction is that Paramount is actually going to win this bidding war. Even after all the points where it looked like they weren't going to, that Netflix was definitely going to take the win, now Paramount is set to acquire Warner Brothers. So how do I feel about this news? Well, I've certainly seen a lot of people lamenting it as the worst possible outcome, but then again, these same people are basing that entirely on their political outlook, and their political outlook tends to be everything I don't like is fascism, so I'm not going to take them overly seriously in that regard. For my own part, I have no particular love for Paramount, and yet I still think this is the better outcome than Netflix acquiring Warner Brothers. See, Netflix made it very clear that they weren't going to prioritize theatrical releases if they got Warner Brothers. I believe there was an official statement about that, or maybe it was leaked or something, but it was said that if they did get Warner Brothers, the high-profile movies like your DC stuff, your MonsterVerse stuff, and so on, would only get maybe a 2-week maximum theatrical window before getting sent right to streaming on the Netflix platform. And you could pretty much kiss any physical releases goodbye, because Netflix only rarely does physical releases. It's not absolute zero, but whatever they do release physically has to have an incredibly high demand, like Stranger Things or Castlevania. So, in all likelihood, we weren't going to be getting any more physical releases. The theatrical releases were going to be nil, very, very short, barely even worth it, but barely blips on the radar. And, as if that weren't bad enough, let's also not forget what Netflix does with the work it already has. Netflix has kind of dealt some serious damage to the art of storytelling in film and television by doing what is called second screen viewing. The irony of watching something on Netflix is that you're not actually supposed to watch it on Netflix. They are catering to an audience that is not paying attention. The kind of people who are going to be scrolling on their phones or doing household chores around their home and basically just having the Netflix thing on as background noise that they'll only check in on to see if there's a loud noise or something. Now, that might appeal to those of you who have the attention spans of goldfish, and it probably also appeals to those of you who have the attention spans of goldfish. But for those of us who actually like to watch movies, that's a sin, practically. You don't make movies that are constantly repeating themselves or that might fall apart if you scrutinize them, but you don't care because who's paying attention anyway. That's not quality. That's just laziness. Paramount, on the other hand, is going to prioritize theatrical releases because they are still in the theatrical release business, and they've been doing well at it. Okay, so the last 2 Mission Impossible movies didn't do so well. Sonic's been doing gangbusters. And once they have the access to stuff like DC and the MonsterVerse, well, you know they're going to do stuff with that. They're not going to not put a Superman movie in theaters. And with the MonsterVerse movies doing well, they're not going to skimp on that either. and we can probably still count on them doing physical releases of stuff, even though they will still have their own Paramount Plus streaming service. So, again, while I don't necessarily have any particular love for Paramount, I'm not, overly favoring them, I do think this is ultimately the better choice. So, here's hoping, and who knows, if and when this deal is finalized, Paramount might greenlight some of those projects that got axed when AT&T bought Warner Brothers. Maybe including some of those Looney Tunes projects that got canned before they could really get off the ground. Although maybe they're waiting to see how Coyote vs. Acme does in theaters. Which still doesn't have a trailer, by the way, as far as I've seen. But that's beside the point. Ultimately, it looks like Paramount is going to get Warner Brothers, and since Warner Brothers holds at least part of the rights to the MonsterVerse, that means that this does ultimately connect to the topic of this channel. Well, we'll see what happens. Hopefully this is a step in the right direction. I certainly think it's a better choice than going with Netflix, but hey, anything can happen at this point. All I know is it looks like this particular deal is set to move forward. And I'm more optimistic about that than the alternative. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off.